Let me quickly get to a developing story, which is turning out to be very interesting. I think this is a ZAFFICO story. As you may be aware that I'm coming from the Copper Belt. If you may call it, you know, from a street language, I'm a copala. I don't know for some of you, but here is the issue that I think I need to put into perspective. When you look at the way the forestry areas are designed on the Copper Belt, in the area of Kalolushi, in the area between Chingola and Kitwe, the area between Kitwe and Ndola, you know, and also some parts of Ndola rural, we will note that also the term Copper Belt was born from a realization that it is an area which has copper deposits. Now, where mining has taken place, you can't put up anything because of open pits. Now, where these forests are sitting, there are deposits of copper there. I think people need to be reminded. There are deposits of copper, that's Copper Belt. There are deposits of cobalt, there are deposits of emerald. That's what you find on the Copper Belt. There is no land on the Copper Belt that is taken for granted. Almost everywhere you go, you'll find some minerals. That is number one. Now, if this is the situation, and ZAFFICO is presiding over an area which has copper, which has emerald, which has cobalt, then we should see beyond ZAFFICO as an entity. We should be talking of the interests of an investor, especially that this particular company is a viable entity, meaning it has the capacity to generate profits, knowing that timber is expensive, so it can be a very good source of revenue. In case you didn't know, this particular forest also has mukula tree, which is quite lucrative in terms of business. And if you remember very well, recently we had a debate surrounding the export of mukula. There was an export ban imposed by government, and later on we saw some mukula logs being impounded by those perceived the PF youths. Now, if the area has mukula, and then the Chinese are targeting timber, I should be more worried as a Zambian. Okay? If you look back, it is the Chinese that bought those 612 houses for those tenants of ZAFFICO houses at a cost of $270,000 US. That's number one. Number two. Now, if that's the case, we should monitor them closely and hope that this is not blackmail. If it turns out that the buyer of those houses for tenants, because you know there's nothing for free when you're dealing with China, you pay for everything that they put in. If that is the one targeting ZAFFICO, people should monitor closely. Then I smell a serious threat actually. Now, let me quickly mention also that this particular ZAFFICO sits on about, I think, 100,000 hectares, between 50,000 and 100,000 hectares. The understanding is that if there are copper deposits, and I was trying to engage some friends who are suggesting, some of them working for ZAFFICO, like yesterday, who are suggesting there are even some mining activities taking place in some forests, which have to be investigated and probed. And access is being denied to that particular area. Okay? Now, if that is what is brewing, then there could be some serious justification and concern. Like I put it, that this is an area that I understand very well. I come from there, I was born there, I did all my education there. I only came to Lusaka for information when I came to the University of Zambia. That is when I explored Lusaka and understood it. So, if that is the situation, then we have a lot to fear. In any case, the understanding is that in the 2019 national budget, I don't know how often you've looked at it, it was very clear that there is intent to list some companies, ZAFFICO inclusive, on the Lusaka stock and securities. Now, the understanding also, I think that is something that has been coming out, that is 2nd November 2018, it was posted by Chief Government Spokesperson, Honorable Raslia, on the 2nd of November. Now, this is information that is just developing. It's not the first time that this information is circulating, where they're saying those that are purporting that it has been sold are false. Okay, I think we've dealt with the issue of selling. And then, let me see if I can get the other one. I'll try to link them, the two. When you look at the tender for the provision, that's Industrial Development Corporation, tender for the provision of transaction advisory services to list Zambia Forestry and Forest Industries Corporation. That is ZAFFICO. That is in Ifu, because ZAFFICO is an acronym. Okay, on the Lusaka Securities Exchange. Now, the ones doing that in October on the 3rd is a government institution called IDC. Now, I'm baffled to learn that citizens are debating about the evidence, bring the evidence, when government has provided you with the evidence with an institution that they listed it. That is a sale through listing shares. You are looking for buyers. Perhaps we need to go beyond, because when you are using words such as shares, sometimes we use them loosely. What are they selling? If you are going to get, for example, 70% or 50%, what is being sold? Because what's happening is that ZAFFICO is an institution that presides over the timber industry. In other words, you will not talk about the forestry area and land, or you will not talk about ZAFFICO without talking about forestry and land. So the issues of shares will be bordering on land, meaning land will have to go. The portions of the forest will have to go. And if it goes into private hands, the understanding is that most likely government cannot dish out all that piece of about 100,000 hectares to a private entity. Don't be surprised if you see people sharing land and occupying it, demarcating it for plot and settlement later on. We should be on the lookout. This is our country. We need to raise these concerns because they border on the future of this country. This is a viable entity. It has the capacity. If there is mukula there, we can export mukula and obviously generate income. And China is aware that there is mukula in Zambia. Mukula has raised the dust. So we should now begin to move away from the debate of evidence and look at mukula on the copper belt, which is highly lucrative and can give us a lot of money. And if that over 70 or between 60 and 70% goes into a private hand, we have lost mukula, which would have helped us as a country. So those should be explored. We will have lost emerald. Those are minerals. We will have lost copper. We will have lost cobalt, because that is where the forestry area is sitting. Anybody that understands copper belt will tell you exactly that. People like, for example, Dorothy, they cannot argue with me about copper belt. Okay? You see, you talk about these people that are moving in as ministers for the copper belt, they don't understand the terrain. Okay? So, it is important that we put these matters into perspective. There is more that we need to begin to debate, as opposed to the idea that has been pushed to an opposition leader, HH, of evidence. When there is evidence from IDC, they advertise themselves. 2019 national budget has a clause in it suggesting the listing of this particular company, meaning it will no longer be in government hands. Shares will be floated. I don't want to repeat myself by talking about the forms of selling companies, because we've talked about them ably. Let me also point out that if we argue from the point of view of the fact that between 60 and 70% shares will have to be sold, I don't think there is a single Zambian that has the capacity to buy those shares. I don't think so.
What could be the reason?
The reason is that this is a very big company. It's not a small company. You're talking about 100,000 hectares. It's a very big company. How many Zambians have the capacity with that experience to buy that? Most likely you're going to see even a foreign company. I wouldn't be surprised if a particular company has already been designated to get the shares that are being floated. I wouldn't be surprised. But obviously posterity will have to judge us. I must mention that it's a viable entity and we have to be on the lookout. This is our property, and if we allow people coming from abroad to take over everything at the expense of the locals, we are finished. We cannot run things sustainably. We'll have lost mukula tree, we'll have lost cobalt, we'll have lost gold, we'll have lost copper, because that is what is found there. Especially mukula. I'm very much interested in mukula. You sell the forest where you find the mukula, you have lost it. And yet we have the youths that have been denied, access to this particular tree to export so that we can generate the needed revenues in this country. So who has interests in that mukula which is found on the copper belt? Who is expressing interest? Who is looking beyond ZAFFICO to the mukula, which has been highly contested? Obviously, you would also love to sell mukula because it fetches a lot of money. So that's the amount.